Hello everyone, I'm Marcy. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'll be making a mixed media project for the Halloween Journal Challenge, hosted by Kia Creates every year, and I will pin a comment linking you to her profile so you can see what everybody's up to. My prompt is spooky stripes, and I've got a little bit of extra inspiration for you here because look what I made for last year's prompt. We've got this haunted house, and on the inside, some lovely striped wallpaper, so I think this would qualify as well. But today I'll be working in this incredible handmade journal that my friend Mariko made for me, and in here I found this lovely striped spread. Perfect! I love these stitches that she put on here. My project is going to be a pop-up. I'll be putting it against this side, and I hope it'll serve as some good inspiration for you to make one of your own. Before starting this, I knew I was gonna want to make it about ghosts again, and because I've already done a house last year, I decided that a graveyard might be fun. So this is the sketch I started from. Just a basic concept, some gravestones, ghosts, pumpkins, and candles in the background. So I gathered all my ephemera that I thought would work for this, and I always grab way too much, but I'll be slowly whittling that down to the ones I actually need. Having all these papers around always helps me decide on an atmosphere for the spread that I'm making. One cool thing that I did find was this lovely cat and then this hat that would fit exactly on its head. So I immediately decided that despite the whole graveyard theme, the cat was gonna have to be a part of it, and it's gonna be. Because the elements of a pop-up are made separately outside of a journal, I would recommend getting a piece of sketch paper and marking the size of your page, just so that you're sure that what you're making is gonna fit in there. That's what I did, and then I designed some gravestone shapes. I will be roughly copying these onto some gray paper, right after I light a whole bunch of candles because it suddenly got really dark in here. So here's my gravestones, and here's my papers. I will say I'm being a bad instructor here because I ended up making more gravestones than this, and you won't be seeing them until they're done. Sorry about that. I picked some fun textured paper for this because I thought it would be super fitting, and I just drew all my stones on here. I made a couple of lighter ones for the front row and then some darker ones for the back row to create more of a feeling of depth for them. And while we watch me do this, I just want to say, if you don't feel like making a graveyard, you can make anything haunted, you know, make a little garden or some houses, it'll all work just as well. Also, while making this, I realized that this original page had an illustration on it, and I wonder if that's why I picked this paper. Kind of funny. For my first row of gravestones, I made the ones to the sides a little bit crooked so that they would lean outward, because I was hoping this would create this effect of this kind of all bursting out of the middle. And then I placed them in the journal where they were gonna go to see what I would want behind. And this will be a second row of stuff that pops out because I'm not doing a single pop-up, I'm doing a 2-layer pop-up. So the background will have candles, the first layer will have gravestones, and then the second layer will have smaller gravestones, and that's these ones. Basically, this is me testing how big everything looks on the page and how well they work together and fit together. Which is when I made and gathered a second bunch of stuff that I didn't show you before, like I said. When I had these basics down, I started picking a second set of images that I might want to include. So I had a nice collection of ghosts and of pumpkins, and also cats and candles. At this point I still had way too much because I like to have options when I start gluing things down. But with that all sorted, let me show you the 2 main ways to make a pop-up so that you know how to do it. If you already know, go ahead and skip this chapter. The simplest way is to create a pop-up out of a single sheet where you make 2 cuts in the middle and then fold that bit outward. And as long as both cuts are the same size, this will work. And everything's automatically in place, it can't move, it has a lot of benefits. The one downside being that these will always be as tall as they are wide. So there's a little bit less freedom in the kind of shapes you can get. But you can create different layers of depth by making longer or shorter cuts. Just make sure that your shorter cuts are on the outside, like so. And then your second method, and what I'm gonna do, is to glue little rectangular shapes, essentially like the outside of a matchbox, and sticking those inside an existing spread. Also really great for postcards, by the way. The way to do this is to make a strip with alternating wider and narrower shapes. In my example here, the purple will be the back and front of the shape, and the orange tabs will be the top and bottom. And that third tab is for attaching the shape to itself. You want to fold all these lines in the same direction, and then when you glue the tabs on the end together, it'll be a flexible rectangle. And side note, it also works if you put 2 of your narrow strips on one side. Just warning you now that I'm gonna do it differently later. But either way will work. So when I glue this into a folded piece of paper, ta-da! It folds right along with it. And that's the main principle of what I'm gonna be doing. And doing it this way allows you to keep it closer to your back panel, or really far away from it if you like. And once you have this, you can start sticking a whole bunch of stuff onto it as long as the bottom edge is straight. Now the pictures I used were all pretty thin, so what I'm gonna do is stick them all down and then cut around all of that. But if that doesn't apply to you, there's a simpler way for that as well. If you just cut 2 half circles in 2 different sizes, you can just glue all of your ephemera onto these and then apply them to the pop-up mechanism. And it'll be a whole lot easier. Bigger half circle on the back layer, the smaller in the front layer, and you'll be all set. Also, I'm not gonna end up doing this, but another really fun thing is if you have some acetate with some patterns on it like I have here, you could do your half circles out of that and use it as an actual element that you can see through to the back layer. Mine is already crazy busy, so I won't be doing this, but I did think it was a really fun idea. But yeah, I think that covers all of the pop-up technical stuff. But if anything still feels confusing, then let me know in the comments. Here I am fitting all my ephemera for my front layer on a piece of paper. Again, using that straight line. Because while this pop-up stuff can look a little bit complicated, as long as you make sure that that bottom really is straight, it should always close just fine. But anything that sticks out would get folded. Most of the fun of this obviously comes from the depth, so I spent a good bit of time deciding which things I would attach to which layer. Mainly that one of my ghosts will be in a different layer than the other. And now I'm just putting all that stuff into place. And you can already see that slight depth effect from those darker gravestones on the side. I'm glad I did that. And like I said before, I cut all around the edges of this to make the paper a little bit less flimsy overall. And just to demonstrate again, as long as all your papers are strong enough, you can attach a whole lot of stuff to just a small pop-up tab. After this, I grabbed a second piece of paper for the back layer. I did it in this order to make it easier to see if everything would be visible when I added it to the second layer, because obviously all of the stuff in the front is gonna be in the way. As you can see, this is also where I'm trying to decide if I wanted this acetate in here, which I did not, because I decided it would be too hard to see my candles all the way in the back. But this to me is actually the hardest part of doing a multi-layered pop-up. I had such a hard time sort of figuring out where everything needed to be. So ultimately I ended up straight up tracing my front layer onto a piece of paper so that I could see where to stick the whole next layer of stuff. I marked all of that down too when I had it all in place. That is a little bit extra, I don't think you really need to do that. But if you're a little bit perfectionistic like me, then you can. And it did make it a little bit easier to glue everything down. I grabbed a black marker to hide some white bits on this piece, and then I cut this out too. Now you can kind of start to see it, I think, what it's gonna be like. This was a fun stage. Although what I'm doing right now was definitely a mistake and I shouldn't have done that. I kind of roughly marked these bits too, and some of these marks are gonna be visible. It's not gonna be a big deal. I'm gonna cover them up. But this is kind of an instruction video, so I'm instructing you now when I say don't do that. Here's another piece of ephemera that I think I completely forgot to show you. It's this whole bunch of flowers. I thought they'd be quite pretty and very fitting because we do like to bring flowers to the dead. This used to be a full circle of flowers, and I cut some off and created a fold in such a way that some of it would touch the back page. I figured it would add a little bit of reinforcement and also add to the depth a little bit. Again, I find visualizing all of this the most difficult part of the whole thing, so here I am kind of predicting what it's gonna look like. Pretty cool. And then I started putting all the candles in place. How did Past Marcy feel about this? Oh, she likes it. I will spare you all of the fussing around getting these candles into place, but this is what I had by the end. My flower floor was the first thing that would have to go into place after the candles, so I trimmed that out properly. Now that I think of it, that's probably the other part that can get a little complicated, is deciding the order in which to put all of the stuff in. But it's not too bad. Though just remember that once you've got your mechanisms and images all stuck in, it's gonna be hard to add something to the background of it. So background first. There we go, tiny bit left to trim here. And after that, I decided to do a little bit of extra decorating. I wanted to add a little bit more color to the whole thing. So I grabbed some purple markers, which I mostly picked because a lot of my flowers are purple. And I started roughly adding some shading to my gravestones. It's just this little detail, but it's gonna make a huge difference to the overall vibe. You'll see. And then the other thing I did was I got a light yellow paint marker, so this is an opaque one. You could just use some paint as well. And I'm gonna add a highlight to the edges of all the pictures that are close to a candle flame. Because if all of this was real, then it would all be backlit by the candles. I think this really did a lot to make this weird random assortment of stuff look like it all fits together. I do believe I have said this in every mixed media tutorial I've done for this challenge, but consider coloring your ephemera. It's so much fun, and it's a great way to make some random elements that maybe don't quite go together look like they go together. It really unifies them. So with all of those done, let's finally actually make the mechanism. I did this in black just in case, and I would just like to again address the fact that I now have two narrow bars on one side instead of having them on both sides of the strip. That is not great tutorial making, but it's gonna work out exactly the same way. I measured two shapes against the back of my ephemera pieces to see what would fit nicely, and then started making them. You want kind of a medium thickness paper for this, because something like a printer paper might not hold everything in place, and then a cardstock might resist you a little bit when folding. Again, you just fold on all the lines, and then as long as you've made all your shapes in the same size, this should fit neatly. Although, if you did the lines in white gel pen, apparently that's all gonna flake off. Good thing this wasn't something decorative, huh? Here's the bit that's different because I put both the bars on one side. That second bar now sticks to the back of the big rectangle. There we go. I'm gonna repeat the same exact process with the second one. Here we are. And now let's get them into this book. Here I am testing it all again. All looks like it's gonna work out, so let's get them in there. With the mechanism, the only part that doesn't get glue is the top of the shape, because the back and the bottom are attaching to the book and the front is gonna have your ephemera. I'm doing everything at once here, but you can totally attach your ephemera to the mechanism first. But whichever way you do it, you just close your book or your card to attach it. Give that a little bit of time for the glue to mostly dry, but check in to see if everything is going where it's supposed to go though, before it's completely dry. But if it's all gone well, you should now have your first layer in place. And again, here I am repeating the process with my second layer. Just adding some glue, and then the part you want to be really careful with is making sure that that back edge is really tightly wedged in there, because that's the bit that's gonna come loose if it's not quite in place. And if you want to be extra safe, just leave a tiny gap at the bottom of your ephemera to make sure that the book can close right. It won't really show. As you can see, mine actually has a slight gap. I don't know about you, but I really don't mind. This is it, basically done. I thought I was done at this place. Has some nice depth to it. But here I noticed that you could see the ink marks that I made a little while before, so really last minute I decided to cover those up. I used some gold stars for that. Stars are really my go-to. I feel like they go with anything, really. And even though this happened because of an accident, I actually think it really finishes off the spread in a nice way. Just a tiny bit of extra magic and whimsy. Like I said, this is the last step of the process, which I hope has been inspiring for you guys. I went with ghosts and gravestones because those are also easy to make your own if you want to. But you can do this in any theme that you like, with the things that you have. And if you do this, then I hope you'll show me. Happy crafting, everybody, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!